Good evening. Welcome to our fourth Just Chillin' Summer Hangout. And I'm here tonight with my friend Irene Fair, who is a sex coach. And I got so many questions from everybody about libido and why you hate sex and why you're not interested and why it hurts, that I thought I would bring in Irene because she's the expert. Got some great stuff to tell us tonight. Irene, how about telling us a little bit about what you do?
Hi, thanks so much for having me on here. So I am a women's sex coach. Well, I'm a sex coach and specifically a women's sexuality coach. And my specialty is helping women reignite their desire after a major life transition, be it motherhood or menopause or cancer treatment. And you hear my dog in the background, who just started, of course, barking as soon as I got on.
Absolutely. I threw mine out of the house with her daddy.
Yeah, so I might have to do the same here in a moment. Excuse me, I think I need to do that.
So Irene, I met her through a coaching group that I belong to, and I was just captivated by her enthusiasm and by her general demeanor and her approach to this whole subject. So back to Irene.
Back to me. So I think the dog is calm now for a while. So I help women around desire, which is such a huge topic. And how I got into this work is that I lost my desire very early on into my marriage that I had in my 20s, and ended up in a sexless marriage and was just incredibly affected by that. And so I have firsthand experience of losing libido and what it meant for me to live without sexual desire, and then also have firsthand experience of discovering sex coaching, getting a sex coach, working with them, and also creating some of my own tools to reignite my own libido and create a thriving sex life. And in addition to that, really owning my sexuality, knowing what that is like to be connected to who I am as a woman, to be connected to my sexual desire, and now working with other women, sharing those tools.
One of the things that I love about Irene is Irene's company is Ignited Woman. And those of you who've been around me for a while know that my company name is Live Ignited, even though I now practice primarily under the title The Menopause Guru. So I thought that was kind of an interesting connection between the two of us.
Yeah.
So let me explain a little bit to our listeners and maybe even to you, Irene, what's going on in menopause, because menopause changes us both physically and emotionally. And the physical changes are at least as annoying, pervasive, getting in the way of our sexual desire as the emotional ones. But it's the emotional ones, I think, that last longer. So physically, estrogen is the lubricant for sex. It's what's giving us lubrication in our mucous tissues around the vagina, around the labia, around the clitoris. All of those things are lubricated and kept moving by estrogen. So early on in menopause, most women are really finding it's the libido that's a problem. So if you're in perimenopause, it's most often the libido that's the issue in sex, and we'll talk about why that is. But as you go into that period of time where you stop having periods and you get to that 1 year mark and you hit menopause and then you're postmenopausal, it's the drop in estrogen that makes it uncomfortable to have sex. And I know I talk a lot to women who say things like, my guy just doesn't want me to use lubrication. He feels like that's making him less of a man, that he can't get me all excited and interested and wet. And the truth of the matter is, it's got nothing to do with him. You just don't have the equipment to make it happen anymore. So for women in that situation, and there's one actually even worse, and it's called vaginal atrophy. And vaginal atrophy is where the tissues in the vagina just don't stretch anymore. So if you've got a guy who's thick, you have a tendency to have a problem there. So you're just not stretching enough. There's a couple of great things to use. The first, obviously, is a lubricant, and a water-based lubricant or coconut oil is probably the best lubricant you can use for this.
I love coconut oil.
Yeah. I'll tell you another story about that later. But the other thing that you can do is there is an estrogen cream. It's bioidentical hormone, and it's the only hormone replacement that I really can stand behind, because what its job is to stay local and just allow those tissues to be a little more flexible. It's called estrase cream. It can be gotten through any pharmacy with a doctor's prescription, and it's the only estrogen that you can use that it is not a risk for uterine cancer without progesterone. So it is a relatively safe. It works in a couple of weeks if you're using it regularly. The bad news is it is not covered by most insurances, and it is a healthy whack on your pocketbook when you first buy it. It does last a while. A tube will last you a while. And that is one thing about it. I thought, okay, it's slippery, it's lubricating, it's doing its job. Why not just incorporate it? Well, the truth of the matter is you really don't want to incorporate it, because then the guy gets the extra dose of estrogen, and you wind up with a guy with moobs, aka man boobs. Actually, it would take a fair amount to do that, but you really don't want to give him that extra dose of estrogen as well. And the second thing, my gynecologist said, this is a great use, however, for a sex toy. Your battery-operated boyfriend.
Yeah.
Use it don't just use it by inserting it in your vagina. Use it all over the tissues around the opening to your vagina, your labia, your clitoris. It helps lubricate and make those tissues more supple, and it also helps prevent urinary tract infections and urinary leakage, because it's helping those tissues as well. So that's the physical side.
Yeah.
The other side of it has to do, there are two pieces of it. One is some women just plain get turned off when they're not fertile. They're no longer fertile. For some reason, it's been connected in their own minds, and that makes it more difficult for them to move forward with sex. Some may also be regretting that they haven't had the number of children they want, or any children at all, and that gets in the way. For some women, though, that's like actually a turn on. It's like, okay, I'm not going to have kids anymore. This is a turn on.
Yeah.
The other piece of it, besides just the hormones, testosterone and estrogen feeding into desire, but the other piece of it is you may not have been getting what you need in your relationship.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's the message of the low sex drive. And that's what Irene is here to talk to us about, is how to get that and what's going on. So if you think that there's just not the connection there with your guy that there was once, this is an important time to kind of get a sense of this being something, okay, good. Of this being a time for you to take charge of your own sexuality, your own pleasure, your own relationship, and create a better relationship with the guy or the woman or whatever, or Bob, whoever you're with, to make sure that that relationship is fulfilling to you. So that's where we get to Irene's part.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we've talked about, you and I, is that a lot of times a woman has just shut down sexually, and then she walks in and, you know, maybe it's her husband's her boyfriend or her husband's birthday, and he just wants to get right into it. And she thinks she's going to just treat him right for his birthday. And so it's really going from 0 to 10 on the desire scale, and it just doesn't work. So what do you do if you want to create that relationship again? And you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear this all the time myself as well. It's like, I don't want to have sex. How can I start wanting to have sex? And it does assume this like 0 to, I think, of like 60 miles an hour in like 1 second, starting from no desire to either having desire the way it used to, or the way you think you should, or the way it's presented in the media. And that's, I see over and over, that just shuts women down. That expectation or that occasion that creates that expectation, like, oh, I want to do this, or this is so romantic. How do I get in the mood right away? Is something that just is not only nearly impossible, but it's damaging to the woman's self-esteem and to the woman's ability to get turned on at all. It's the performance anxiety. And so when I work with women around this, I have them start breaking down, okay, what turns you on, a little thing each day? What turns you on in your body? That's not like full-blown sex. That's not the natural progression of like foreplay to then making out to then intercourse. But what is it that turns you on? And start doing that and start adding those things into your life. So that can be something non-sexual completely. Like, what turns me on is taking a bath. And giving yourself that space and that time and that opportunity to relax and sink into your body, which of course is necessary for sex because we experience sex in our bodies. And then also incorporating sexual things, but that are not, again, specifically like intercourse sex. So it could be kissing. You know, allowing for kissing for 5 minutes of goalless kissing each day, maybe where there wasn't that before, or being touched a certain way, especially on your genitals, especially just having that touch without the goal of penetration and sex, and allowing that play in your regular day. This is where we need to start with those like little bits and pieces, and then ramp up to eventually having sex. And that removes the pressure.
You know, one of the things that you just brought up the third thing, and obviously I forgot to mention this because it's the biggest thing that was going on with me, is that it's really sometimes very hard for women who hit menopause and then they're dissatisfied with their body. They're feeling like they're old, dried up, worn out, too fat, whatever it is. They're hating themselves, hating their bodies, and trying to get sexual in this body that you don't like, much less love, is really, really difficult, especially if the person on the other side of that relationship dares to make a comment. I'm going to throw that one back to you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge, huge element. If you don't feel good, just period, if you don't feel good about yourself, you don't feel good in your skin, it is going to reflect in your sex drive. And what really works, you have to at least want to change that. I can give you all the tips in the world, but if you, as the woman, don't want to change that perspective, then there's not much to be done. But when you do want to learn to love yourself as you are, the key, or the thing that I teach that I see being incredibly effective, is starting to, before you can love your body, start feeling your body. Start recognizing. So we're trained to look at our bodies, right? Like we look in the mirror and we see this thing, we see this face, we see this body, we see the wrinkles, the this and that, right? But in that moment, we're not feeling ourselves. We're disconnected from what's actually happening in the body. We're disconnected from the actual aliveness and sensation and things that are happening, and the actual turn on, because that too happens as a feeling in the body. And so I teach women to connect to their bodies and start feeling it. Start noticing, even now, like, I feel a tingling in my hips, and I'm feeling heat in my shoulders, and I'm feeling heat in my face, and I am, feeling all these things. Then it starts being like, wow, I actually feel this aliveness inside of me. And that becomes the process of rewiring ourselves to connect to ourselves, not as this, again, image in the mirror, but this being, this, living, breathing, feeling being. And it's so beautiful to watch. I experienced that in my own self, and I watch that now with clients really wake up and realize, wow, I feel this. I'm alive. And that's a big turn on.
Yeah. And I know I do this with my people with exercise, because I want them to get out and feel what their body's doing. And I always recommend that people dance. And I talk about this in my first book, about how I was never a dancer. In fact, I was highly discouraged from pursuing ballet. And I was
you and me both.
It was a different world back then. There was no self-esteem building from Madame in the ballet school, who said, no,
yeah.
And that, I kind of put away dance as a medium of expression. But then when I got back to dance a few years ago, I just realized how wonderful it is for being able to experience all the different ways that your body can move, and just really taking the time to appreciate that.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing with my group as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it that the physical pleasure brings to the ability to have sexual desire?
Yeah, this is such an important one. So for women's sexuality, stimulation precedes desire for the most part. I would say that that's true for about 2/3 of women. Where, some women, where it's the reverse, where they have that sexual desire, they can access their sexual energy from within. And this is women who can fantasize easily, who can get turned on very easily. For them, that desire is there, and whether there's stimulation or not. But for about 2/3 of us, stimulation precedes desire. We have to have physical touch that activates our cells, our nerve endings, our bodies, that then feeds sexual desire. And the truth of the matter is that all women in the world, this is not even a Western problem, this is a global problem, we are incredibly depleted in pleasure, incredibly depleted in the kind of pleasure we need, so the kind of physical stimulation we need, just sheer amount of touch, like how much we need to be held, how much we need to be just touched, like stroked, how much we need specific kind of stimulation to be turned on. So clitoral stimulation, general vaginal, not even intravaginal, but vaginal stimulation, labia, and the whole body. And this depletion is making it so that we're all running on an empty tank. And for many women, this is regardless, premenopause, after menopause, we're going into sex with an empty tank. And while sex, of course, is also, it gives us energy, it's also an activity where we have to give energy. And if we're going in on empty, we may be coming out at 0, or we may be coming out of sex at a negative. And that really affects our sex drive. That creates painful sex. So this is sex from basically the tightening of the vagina, because you're just so depleted, like you're on empty, you're not stimulated enough. And the 15 minutes of foreplay, maybe even 50 minutes of foreplay may not be enough if you're coming from such a low point. Painful sex starts for many women because it's just there's not enough to start with. And so this is something that I talk about, and this is something that I help my clients in, how to fill up their bodies with exactly the kind of touch that they want, ranging from non-sexual touch to sexual touch, so that they come into sex from overflow, that they have all this energy to give, that they're turned on before even entering the bedroom. And this is something that's really critical, because we think that turn on happens in the bedroom. And this is such a huge mistake, because turn on has to happen the moment you wake up in the morning, and not because you're getting ready for sex in the evening, but because it fills you up.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I know that for me, one of the ways that I recaptured just that whole feeling about my body and the connection to my body was through massage. And for me, I just didn't even want to be touched after my divorce. And it really wasn't until I allowed myself to start getting massages, and I started with bra on and panties on, and maybe even a pair of shorts, I think, at first, where, I wasn't comfortable in the room, but sooner or later I got really, really comfortable with having my body touched and given pleasure that was asexual.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
Yeah. And you point to something that's really important, which is starting from where you are. So if you're uncomfortable being there naked, start with what you are comfortable with. And this is, giving yourself permission to just be where you are. Because the conversation that we started with, or the point that we started the conversation with about, this expectation of like 0 to 60 in sex and what it's supposed to look like, all these expectations, they trip us up. And because we're expecting ourselves to look a certain way, to be a certain way, to be comfortable with certain things. And when we're not, we beat ourselves up or we close up. And, libido is life force. That's really the short of it. Sexual desire, sexual drive is life force. And life force does not function well when we are beating it and saying, you need to be this way.
This is a conversation you and I have had about how this energy moves through our body. And you're right. Yeah. This is just a way in which our life force, our chi, our ki, however you want to term it, can connect with another person, or even just sort of connect circularly with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So a lot of times women don't think that they just don't have any sexual desire left. They're just ready to give it up. So tell me a little bit. I know you have a philosophy that we probably have more desire than we think we do. Would that be the way to state it?
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. I have this happen all the time. So when I start working with clients, we start kind of debriefing where they are and what's happening for them, and they will start talking about, yes, I have no desire. I don't want anything. And then I start prodding and I start pulling things apart. And what ends up happening is that, yeah, we're desire machines living. We wake up and that itself is a desire to live. We go get food. That's a desire to sustain life throughout the day. That reach for a glass of or a glass of water or a cup of coffee, or that desire to read a book. They're all desires. However, again, this is the pressure that we create around sex. It's like sexual desire has to look a certain way. If I'm not like tearing the clothes off of my partner, and if I'm not wet, and if we're not, jumping on each other, that's not passionate sex. We start discounting the desires that we have. Maybe because they're not sexual enough, maybe they're not hot enough, maybe they're just not, maybe they're like boring desires. And so my approach is having women start noticing their desires. And that trips them up so much, because what they end up noticing first is actually all the ways that they discount their desires, they write them off, they blame their desires, they just don't want to accept them, they don't want to feel them, because actually feeling desire is really vulnerable. It's like opening up your kimono and saying, hey, this is what I want, this is what's most important to me.
Yeah.
And we're taught and we learn very quickly to discount all of that. And so it's a rewiring process. It's a relearning process. And it's a process that then snowballs in a positive way of building up and including sexual things, which start to arise on their own.
One of the things I find with some of the women that I connect with on a fairly regular basis is that if they're in groups of just women, especially just women in perimenopause or menopause, that they'll complain about their husbands, they'll complain about their boyfriends, they won't have any desire. It's like, oh no, it's his birthday, he's going to come home wanting sex, and I just don't want it. But post a picture of Shamar Moore or a cowboy in just chaps, yeah, and they're all over that thing. So it's, I think there's a lot about that relationship too that has to be fulfilling. And I think somebody said it the other day, is the sexiest man in the world is the one that's vacuuming the floor and doing the dishes.
Yeah.
And putting the kids to bed if you're younger. But
yeah. And also around the relationship piece is, it's really important to be able to bring in your desire into the relationship, not necessarily act on it, but be able to voice it and bring it in. Because in traditional relationships, we don't create space or allow ourselves or our partners to say that we have desire for something else, like just a different activity that what we're used to doing, and someone else. And when we start cherry picking desire, again, desire is life force. It doesn't work in like, we're going to shut off desire here, but we want it amplified here. It doesn't work that way. And so if this desire, if there's no room in the relationship to say, yeah, I find this movie star hot, or this other person hot, that can bring heat into your relationship. But if you're suppressing that, even just naming it, then that's, you're closing off a part of yourself that you cannot share with your partner, which of course affects intimacy.
Yeah.
If you're just, you're putting up a mask for your partner and holding things back to yourself, that will, of course, hamper intimacy and hamper sexual desire.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the shift that happens at menopause, what do you see that as affecting women in particular? Why is it such a big shift why do you see it? We talk from my point of view.
Yeah. Well, what I see a lot, and this also for some women starts earlier. For me, it started at 32. I'm not in menopause, but this started way before that. And I think it's a phase that starts in women's late 30s and then goes into 40s and early 50s, where women start to take charge of their lives. And take charge of their sex life. And I call this having sex for their pleasure. So before, sex was probably for the relationship, for the intimacy in the relationship, for keeping a relationship, for the kind of the obligation piece, for creating children, and pleasure was secondary, and maybe even depth of experience in sex was secondary, or maybe even non-existent. And what I see over and over is, especially women in menopause, with the hormonal changes, and I love how you put it, where the hormonal changes basically create this sense where women don't give a shit anymore about things. And that's exactly what I see. It's like, women want sex for their pleasure. They want it exactly the way it feels good to them. From the exact touch, the kind of touch, the speed, the pressure, to where it's on the body, how it's done, and how they want the intimacy in the container to be.
Yeah. And I talk a lot about the estrogen. Estrogen has kept us together and going as a species for a very long time, because without estrogen, we would have killed estrogen and oxytocin. We would have killed our mates, and we would have killed our children. And, because we put up with a lot as women. We have to be the glue that holds the family and the community together, because together with our children, we're the vulnerable ones. So we have to create this space where we can be safe to raise these children. And of course, that's a biological imperative. But this is part, to me, of what I talk about in my books, The Phoenix Rising or Eve's Gift. This is our gift. Most species don't have a technical menopause. Mm-hmm. There are very few species that do. And we are fortunate to have one, because it allows us to concentrate on ourselves. And it kind of makes me crazy when I talk to people. There was a woman who was researching, we could use hormones and we'd never lose our periods and we'd be fertile till we were 75. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, you wouldn't be getting this beautiful gift that nature gives us in connecting back to ourselves and what's important to us. And also, I love this. Well, there are two quotes I want to mention. One is by Carl Jung, who has this beautiful quote about, what felt right in the morning doesn't fit anymore in the afternoon of life.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, I love that, because this is that. What's that?
I said, how is it that I missed that one?
Yeah, I'm working with this man, Robert. Oh my gosh, Bill Roberts, on rites of passage for women around midlife and sexuality. So all of this conversation is perfectly fitting for that. And so he shared this quote with me, and he also this is Bill Roberts. He talks about the midlife transition as also a transition from a conversation with society in the first half of our lives, with parents in adolescence, and then with the rest of society in our 20s and early 30s and motherhood. And then the second half of our lives is a conversation with the spiritual. It's a conversation with the universe and where we fit into this universe.
Yes.
yeah, if we didn't have menopause, if we didn't have this clear marker that does allow us an opportunity to take stock of where we've been and where we want to go and start having these deeper conversations, that would be a gift that would be just so sad to not have.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And that's what I do with my people is we start, we might start with what your body is feeling like. And I do an awful lot of work with weight loss. I do some work with people who come in from another symptom or another problem around what their bodies are feeling and how they're feeling. But it always comes back when we start examining what's going on in the body. That's almost always a symptom of what's going on at a deeper level, what's going on spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Yeah. And I know with you, I recently did what I'm now calling a somatic conversation. And we found that your body had a clear message for you. And would you tell everybody a little bit about how that conversation, you don't have to go into the details, but how that's changed for you, your perception of yourself?
Yeah. Going into the conversation, I had a sense that there was something else happening in my body than just the physical symptoms. And for our listeners, I've been struggling with adrenal fatigue and also a systemic candida in my body, which is a yeast unbalance in the body, which causes a lot of other symptoms than just plain yeast, such as fatigue and even depression. And so in this session, we started going into the body and I wanted to talk to my candida and find out like what's happening, what is really the underlying thing. And in this session, it was just such a beautiful experience of getting into my body, but in a way stepping outside of it and looking at it from a different perspective than the way I'm used to. And it helped me gain real insights into what was happening, like where were their energetic blocks and what message did they have for me. And it was just such a beautiful, deep experience that was a door opener into understanding, into like getting messages, and then I had to follow in the footsteps or the breadcrumbs of messages towards opening them up.
It's been wonderful watching what's happened with you because, I get little glimpses. Obviously, Irene is not menopausal, so she doesn't really fit in, but we were having a conversation and she told me that she wanted to talk to her candida. And I said, well, that's something that I'm moving into. I've been working with him as I've gone into Reiki. And she became one of my first somatic conversations. And it's just been that way with almost everybody who's gone through one of these. They've just gotten the insights into what's going on. I just talked to somebody who did one with me a few days ago, and now she's actually writing a book between these two sides of herself that we discovered in this session. And it's really amazing.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I think help us understand ourselves and open us up for the work that you're doing. And I'm amazed with how much knowledge our bodies hold for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's certainly true with sex and sexuality, that it's not I think we're globally, we're really scared of sexuality because it is physical. It's in the body, and it takes us out of control. So we try to compensate for that with our heads, and it doesn't help us. Our heads are always, not always, of course, but mostly are in the way. And so getting into your body is just so important, and listening to its messages, listening to its very nuanced voice, and listening to what it wants. and trusting that that it knows what is right for you. And I knew that in sex, and with these recent experiences, with the somatic conversation that we had, and my experiences thereafter, I'm realizing that that's so true with illnesses and diseases as well.
Mm-hmm.
That they have something to share with us, and we need to listen to our bodies to be able to overcome them and solve them.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to open this up to questions.
Yeah, I'd love
If
to.
there's anyone who is listening and would like to unmute themselves and ask a question. Or Irene, did you get any questions ahead of time?
I didn't get any, no, but I have actually a friend who couldn't make it to our session, who's been wanting me to address this question. So I'd love to throw that out if we don't have anyone on the call.
Right now, I don't see anyone unmuted. But if someone wants to join in, they can do that.
Yeah.
But go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so the question I get, and this is specifically to my friend Amy, who asked this question of, how do I start communicating with my partner about what's happening for me sexually? Like, I don't have any desire, and how do I start communicating? And I get this question so much, and I'm sure so many women will relate to this and want to know the answer to that. And the first thing I want to say is, around communication, is getting really connected to what's true for you, what's happening for you, like really honest and really connected, and accepting what it is. Like so many of us across the board, we don't want to accept when we don't want something that we should want or that is expected of us. So that creates like this closure. And so the first step in communicating to your partner is actually communicating with yourself and getting really honest about what is true for you, like really true, not what should be true, but what really is true for you. And the second piece is around communication, is start planting those seeds with your partner, just letting them know where you are. And this, of course, this is a big topic, because if there's built up resentment, if there's built up anger, if there's needs that haven't been met, that it's very hard to have those communications. But again, getting really clear and conscious of what's happening inside is the first step to then starting to have those conversations.
And part of that too is working with and understanding that whether or not that relationship is fulfilling your needs elsewhere. Because I know for me, my first relationship was not meeting my needs, nor was I meeting his needs, by the way. I won't put it all on him. But that made sex even more difficult, because we just really didn't have a relationship. So always start with trying to make the relationship what you want it to be, and being honest enough to know if that relationship has outlived its usefulness to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also in the relationship piece, we women, we need safety. We need to feel safe in order to express ourselves. And that's certainly true for sex as well, to be able to really open up, to be really vulnerable, to be really fully expressed. We need that safety piece. And so if that safety is not there, you have to start with that. Safety in terms of being received emotionally and met emotionally. Safety in terms of knowing that our partners can listen to us and they're not going to write us off or gaslight us or blame us. That has to be even the most fundamental thing is asking for that safety, or realizing that, hey, that safety doesn't exist. So it's not really just me who's having problems here. It's that the container of the relationship is not enabling me to be as expressed.
Right.
Yeah.
Any closing remarks you'd like to make, or give us a way that anyone who's listening to this can get in touch with you and find out more about how you're working? And
Yeah, I'd love to stay connected. So you can find me on my website at ignitedwoman.com or irenefair.com, either one. And please send me questions. I'd love to continue the conversation and share answers with the viewers who will be watching this in the recording. And I have several free videos on my website around painful sex, around the different methods of reigniting desire, as well as a couple of free guides. So I really invite you all to find the resources that you need and get them, and reach out if I can be of further support.
that's terrific. And I want to mention that we're going to continue this conversation next week. And I will be sending out to my list a time and place for that conversation so that you can join us if you'd like to hear more from myself and from Irene. We may take it a little bit more from my point of view for this time, but the option is there to find out more and also to send either of us questions. I am Jeanne, JeAnne, at menopause.guru, and you can find me on menopause.guru, and you can find information about the somatic conversation that we were talking about earlier. And it's an amazing way to connect with your body and begin this conversation with your body, which is what we've been really talking about, is women in conversation with their own bodies, their own desires, their own feelings. And that's what it's all about at this stage of our lives. So, unless...
Thank you for a reminder of next week's talk. I completely forgot. And it will be on next Thursday at the same time, which is 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time.
And 7 p.m. Central time.
Yes. And again, it's August 4th, next Thursday. And yes, you will be my guest, and we're going to talk more about menopause and the symptoms and effects and ways to thrive during menopause. And I'm so eager to have that conversation.
And we will not be on this particular room, although I'll probably stick this room up with a link to where we'll be in case you happen to stop by the wrong spot.
Yes.
And we'd love to have you join us again.
Absolutely.
For further conversation.
Yes.
Irene, it's been wonderful having you. If there are no further questions, I'd love to say thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Stop